Among the top 10 Flat Earth channels on YouTube with the highest subscriber counts, there are several that many English speakers are not aware of because their entire channel is in a foreign language. With 183,000 subscribers, the channel NAOV, with their entire channel in Spanish, is one of such channels. They are currently in 7th place in the top 10. And recently I just discovered an old video that they published back in March of 2019 about lunar eclipses that really stood out to me. So I'm going to go ahead and translate it for you. Please enjoy. To start off, please note this is their disclaimer, not mine. The information presented in this video does not necessarily reflect the opinions or points of view of NAOV. Greek astronomers thought the best way to explain lunar eclipses was by imagining that the moon and sun occupied opposite sides of the Earth, and that the shadow of the planet cast by the sun fell on the moon and eclipsed it. A solar eclipse is apparently the result of the moon passing between the sun and the observer on the Earth. Simulations and tests have been carried out to show that eclipses occur perfectly in this flat Earth geocentric model. But even today, we still ask many questions about the sun and moon. Videos of the solar eclipse on March 20th of 2015. These look kind of like orbs. The claim that a lunar eclipse arises from the shadow of the Earth is an affirmation that has not really been proven. This may seem strange, but let's take a look at this from the flat Earth perspective. During the full moon, the full disk of the moon shines brightly, which effect is impossible from a spherical surface. If the surface of the moon were opaque and earthy, instead of polished like a mirror, it could be seen simply illuminated like a wall, or like the face of a distant sandstone rock, but it couldn't shine brightly from everywhere like the moon does. Let's look at 4 important factors in knowing the true topography or shape of the moon. Number 1, the conformation factor. A shadow will always naturally move across different types of surfaces. Shadows will always conform to the shape of whatever surface or area they land on, revealing the true shape of the object. This never happens on the surface of the moon during an eclipse. Number 2, the shadow diffusion factor. On a sphere, the shadow is more diffuse around the edge. The shadow is sharper or more defined in the portion that protrudes toward you from the center of the sphere. This is because the closer the shadow is to the light source, the sharper the shadow will be. And the farther the shadow is from the light source, the longer and more diffuse the shadow will be. This is the factor of shadow diffusion. The shadow doesn't just go up and down. It stretches, bends with the surface, and becomes sharper or more diffuse. With these 2 factors, you can know the topography or real shape of the moon. But the next factor is also really important. Number 3, the sine wave factor, or the shadow in the shape of an S. If the shape of the moon is spherical, The shadow that is projected onto the moon must also take the characteristics of a sphere. This critical factor never appears in lunar eclipses. The shadow here is caused when one sphere passes in front of another sphere. While the shadow moves on the sphere, it adapts as it moves around the curve. The shadow will take on the spherical contour and will always follow the nearby edges due to perspective. The shadow will take the shape until it reaches the highest point. As the shadow passes the midpoint, it begins to bend in a curved fashion. When a shadow moves across a 3D sphere, the center or closest part of the sphere is the thinnest. The larger the sphere, the more the angle of its curvature will be noticed. At the end, the curvature will always be seen. When we see any lunar eclipse, there is no curvature or stretching or change in the sharpness of the shadow. In fact, in each lunar eclipse, it looks as if there is a disk moving through another flat disk, like seen in this image. While the circular shadow passes over the moon, it maintains its circular shape the entire time. It is not stretched, it is not distorted, you do not see the S shape, and it does not become sharper. These factors are enough to see that the moon is not spherical. But one more factor is missing to realize the surroundings of the moon, and that is the factor of reflected light. The reflector does not cool down when it is given light and heat. The reflected light must be of the same color and properties of those of the origin. Only the intensity and quantity must vary. On the moon, this does not happen. It reflects differently, and its light does not have heat. On the contrary, its light cools. Temperature measurements have been made that prove it. When another object gets closer to a sphere, the light it is reflecting will appear. During an eclipse, they tell us that the moon is reflecting the light of the Earth, but the Earth is reflecting the light of the moon. If the moon was truly reflecting the light of the Earth, there would be no new moon phase, which is when the moon is not seen and disappears. If the moon were in total darkness, then it should be illuminated by the Earth, because that is when it is supposedly closest. But of course, that does not happen. So observations and experiments lead to the conclusion that the moon shines with its own light. It is not a reflector of sunlight, but it is absolutely autonomously luminous. It has been shown that the Earth has no orbital or axial movement. Therefore, it can never come between the sun and the moon. According to the tests of the Earth, we live on a plane that is always under the sun and the moon. Therefore, it is physically impossible for the Earth to intercept the sun's light and for the Earth to cast its shadow onto the moon. In addition to the above difficulties or incompatibilities, there are many cases that record the sun and the moon being eclipsed when both are above the horizon without being aligned with the Earth. This phenomena has occurred on different dates throughout history and has been recorded by different astronomers and observers. The above does not fit with the idea that a lunar eclipse arises from the shadow of the Earth. Astronomers in the past have come to the conclusion that there is at least one non-luminous body of considerable magnitude that is connected like a satellite to this Earth and exists as an invisible moon in the sky. This satellite is called the shadow object, or anti-moon, which makes eclipses possible. Lunar eclipses only happen when both the moon and the anti-moon are aligned in a place on the sun's orbital path called a node. So a lunar eclipse occurs when this dark, non-luminous body passes in front of the moon, or enters the surface of the moon and the observer sees it from the surface of the Earth. The existence of dark bodies revolving around the luminous objects in the firmament has been admitted by practical observers from the earliest ages. In our day, so much evidence has been accumulated on the subject that astronomers are compelled to admit that there are not only dark bodies which occasionally obscure luminous stars when they are in conjunction, but that there are cosmic bodies of great size, and that at least one is connected to this Earth as a satellite. Many people who are not familiar with the methods of calculating eclipses and other phenomena tend to regard such calculations as powerful arguments in favor of the spherical Earth doctrine and Newtonian philosophy in general. But they have nothing to do with these predictions. It is not difficult to form a general notion of calculating eclipses. It can be easily conceived by prolonged observations of the sun and moon. The lunar eclipse is a phenomena that comes in patterns. By studying these patterns, it is possible to predict when the next transit or lunar eclipse will occur. Astronomers can use historical tables with some equations to predict the time, the magnitude, and the duration of future eclipses. This does not only apply to the eclipse. All recurring phenomena, such as the transits of the planets, the occultation of bodies, and the accuracy of the paths through the sky, are predictable only because they are phenomena that come in patterns. Astronomers predict celestial events by studying these patterns and calculating when the next one will take place. NASA even actually freely admits that they use old cycle tables for their eclipse predictions. Modern theorists predict eclipses today using the Sharon cycle, and the old beatdown methods that just look at the past patterns in the sky to predict exactly how and when the next eclipse will occur. Tables of the sun and moon have been used to locate eclipses and related phenomena for thousands of years, and were formed independently of each other by the Chaldeans, Babylonians, Egyptians, Hindus, Chinese, and other ancient astronomers. Modern science has had nothing to do with this, beyond making them a bit more exact by averaging and reducing the fractional errors by having a longer period of observation. But those predictions do not contribute to our knowledge of the causes of eclipses, and they do not allow us to predict anything that has not already happened hundreds of times. This message was brought to you by NAOV and the Flat Earth Institute of Science. Thank you all for watching.